Greetings and salutations, all one and all. Welcome to the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It's Community and Finance Night. And what a night it is shaping up to be. Inviting you to call a friend, tell a friend, friends of your friends, friends of your enemies, enemies of your friends, and your enemies too. Tell everybody. It's Community and Finance on the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew, happening right now.
It is time for us to make peace and stop the fighting. One love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more borders around me, no more mental slavery. Bob Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight, let it be for justice. And if we war, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence, oppression, racism. No, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best. None but ourselves can free your minds. But if we fight, and if we war, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. 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 No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. We the people are from royalty. Royalty. I wish so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence. Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise. In the news last week, another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets.
If we fight, let it be for justice. If we argue, let it be for justice. No matter what it is, let it be for justice. The sound of Miss China Nicole.
Let it be for justice.
That's the title of the track right there.
Let it be for justice.
Simple, effective.
Be for justice.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
I want to officially say welcome to the night shift to DJ Kevin Stew Community and Finance Night.
For justice. Let it be.
Big ups to the affiliates all over.
Let it be for justice.
Those who are tuned in on TuneIn Radio on the night shift to DJ Kevin Stew.
Let it be for justice.
Those locked in on One Harmony Radio to the UK. Top of the morning to you guys.
Royalty.
Big ups King Genius.
Of us.
Much love to you.
See. Keep the culture.
Big up to those out of New Jersey on NIE Radio.
Ourselves create the friend.
Those locked in with the Motivator.
This week another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets.
Big up to those who are locked in out of New York. On Island Worldwide, exhibiting the power of music.
But if we fight, let it be for justice.
I want to say much love to those on the Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com. Keeping things locked in Fort Lauderdale, in Florida, South Florida. Much love to those who are locked in out of Texas. Those on WGLRO, home of the Donning Walker Morning Show, taking from the sheets to the streets and the People Station. Touching from Detroit to Denmark and all points in between. Those on Ottawa Radio, Dusik Media Groups. Much love to you. Texas well represented. And very well should be.
With so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence.
A lot of our listeners tonight
and ourselves create
have connections in Texas.
Last week another bomb overseas.
Some hailing out of Texas.
Streets.
Our guest tonight also hails out of Texas, but we'll get there in a minute. No stranger to the night shift to DJ Kevin Stew. I want to say thank you to my segment sponsors. Paul C Media Group, when being in a moment is priceless, give them a call. For videos, photos, streamings, and advert ads. You're doing any of your advertising. Yeah man, they can take care of you. You have an event you want to stream live on a secure platform, a graduation, a funeral service, a party, a seminar, a wedding.
See,
you name it.
Of us.
Give them a call, 754-999-1140.
Culture be united, stop the violence.
They can do everything you see here on kevinstew.com and more.
This week another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in.
Yeah, you can broadcast your event on your own website. And if you don't have one, they can hook you up nonetheless. Check them out at paulcmg.com and tell them DJ Kevin Stew sent you. I want to say thank you to Althea and her Healing Heavenly Hands. Althea is a licensed massage therapist operating out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade and South Palm Beach counties. She comes to you, bringing her table, her oils, and of course her Healing Heavenly Hands with over 20 years massage therapy experience. Give her a call, 954-655-9000. That's 954-655-9000. Make your appointment today. Outside of paying her, she only has one request: to get off her table and go sleep somewhere else.
We the people are
Believe me, I do it all the time. Fall asleep right there.
There's so many of us. I
want to say thank you to Reggae Global Entertainment.
Be united, stop the violence.
Reggae Global Entertainment will act as your booking agents, handle your tour management,
last week another
your video design, graphic design, press releases, business registration, legal service referrals, music production, marketing and promotion, and so much more. Give them a call, 954-804-8199. That's 954-804-8199, or check them out online, reggaeglobalentertainment.com. Thank you to McNeil Trucking. With McNeil Trucking, you're in good hands. They're licensed and insured for your moving needs.
Let it be for justice.
Give them a call, 954-406-9740. That's 954-406-9740. Tell them you heard about them on the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. You want to move from here to there? Or from there to here? Call them up and see what they can do for you, how they can hook you up. The sound of Shannon Nicole in the background. Track says, let it be for justice. And boy, do we need some justice. Tonight, we're looking at something interesting that happened recently and how it can actually affect the case or make some effective difference in the case that Rodney Reed is presenting to plead his innocence. And so I titled tonight's broadcast, Texas Law Could Help Reed. And with me tonight is none other than Mr. Botinsky himself, who is no stranger to the night shift to DJ Kevin Stew, and definitely not a stranger to the Rodney Reed case, which is if you're not familiar, Rodney Reed is on death row for the murder of Stacey Stites, or I should say rape and murder, as he's accused. And without further ado, I present to you the man of the moment, Mr. David Fisher.
Thank you for that audacious introduction, Kevin. I feel like I thought you were going to say, Mr. David Budinsky Fisher, and that's what I thought you were going to say.
I said it already. Mr. Botinsky himself.
Oh yeah, you put it out there, absolutely, and it is my nickname, and I've had district attorneys throw it at me when we've had our first conversation. They'd go, "Oh, is this Mr. Budinsky?" And I said, "Well, this confirms to me that you know how to use the internet,
right?
Because you were able to find that."
Exactly.
So, anywho. We have some really interesting developments in the Reed case, and
yes.
for the longtime viewers or listeners of Kevin's program, 2 years ago was the first program that I did with Kevin, and I devoted a large part of that program to taking shots at Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project and warning everybody that there was a high likelihood that they would throw Rodney under the bus and try to get him executed.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, that is what happened at this evidentiary hearing.
Those are strong accusations, though, Dave.
Yeah, but they're buttressed by the facts. You see, when in 2017, they had an evidentiary hearing.
Yeah.
Bryce Benjett of the Innocence Project was representing Rodney Reed. Good old Quincy McNeil was sitting right next to him. And they put Michael Botten, the America's foremost forensic pathologist, on the stand. Now, the pictures that Bryce was putting before Botten were altered or low-quality pictures. The state then got Dr. Botten to admit that the Travis County Medical Examiner, Bayardo, who did the autopsy, had a better cat's eye position on viewing the actual evidence than Botten had reviewing these pictures.
Right.
And Botten and Baden confirmed that. I mean, it's true. Well, the Court of Criminal Appeals, when they ruled against Rodney, made it clear to the Innocence Project that without first undermining Bayardo, his competency, his credibility, that the court would have to side with Bayardo as being the person with hands-on in the autopsy than a forensic pathologist, no matter of what caliber. In order to make the defense forensic pathologist equal or a better witness than Bayardo, you have to show that Bayardo either lied, committed perjury, tampered with evidence, was incompetent, something along those lines. So that's what the Court of Criminal Appeals told the Innocence Project in 2018.
Okay.
So here comes Barry Scheck to the evidentiary hearing the last 2 weeks of July. He brings two forensic pathologists, Andrew Baker, who did the autopsy on George Floyd,
right,
and a guy from Tennessee. The guy from Tennessee makes the comment that looking at the picture, he sees no signs that Stacey has any burns on her body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about blow your foot off, your leg off, your whole lower body up to your neck in one shot. That's what he did.
Right, because he was brought on by the defense.
Because if the evidence shows that there's burns. He did incisions. The the forensics people, the crime lab, talk about the oddness of the skin. Bayardo told the ranger that the burns were caused by slow burns, which are low temperature, long duration. Now, the kick is that until I found those records in January of this year, the defense had never seen them, of Bayardo ever telling anybody anything about what caused the burns. These were hidden from the defense. It's evidence that the Court of Criminal Appeals was looking for in this hearing. Did Vereshek use it? Nope. Nope. On top of that, they didn't go after Bayardo.
Right.
They didn't say Bayardo committed perjury here. Bayardo's incompetent. His credentials are all false. He is guilty of Sixth Amendment Confrontation Clause violations in both Stacy's autopsy and the autopsy of Ed Somala. Anybody that has copies of those autopsy reports, with those autopsy reports are the toxicology reports. Right. Look and see who signed the toxicology reports. They're both signed by Bayardo.
Right.
Medical examiners in Texas.
And I had shown documents of that on a previous broadcast.
Right. The medical examiner can't sign a toxicology report because he did not perform the test. That takes a chemist, a PhD. At this time, at the time of Stacy's autopsy and Ed Somala's, the toxicologist at the Travis County morgue was J. Rod McCutcheon, who was delivering evidence to the crime lab from the autopsies. I have the submission forms.
Mm-hmm.
So when Bayardo signed the toxicology reports and then testified off of them, he violated Rodney Reed's Sixth Amendment constitutional rights to confront the witness, which is the true toxicologist.
Right.
Bayardo started doing that in 1990 and did that all the way through, God, when did I stop it? 2006?
What?
In every case. Now, I do in-depth research, and when I started noticing this, because I have autopsies that go back to the 80s and the 70s.
Yes.
And so when I suddenly stopped seeing the toxicologist sign the toxicology reports, and Bayardo or the medical examiner did the autopsy, started signing them. So I went, and I had to go to the state's archives and dig backwards until I found a 1990 case where the DA tried to put Bayardo on the stand to testify off a toxicology report that was signed by the chief toxicologist at that time, which was Walter Tripp. Mm-hmm. The defense attorney objected under, that Bayardo didn't do the toxicology and his testimony would be hearsay. So the district attorney in Travis County told the judge, that's not a problem. We'll bring in the toxicologist after lunch. And they did. Starting the next day, the medical examiner started signing the toxicology reports, which is a criminal fraud.
The next day?
The very next day. That way they would never have a defense attorney, stop the medical examiner from testifying off the toxicology. Well, why would you do that? Well, because Travis County's toxicology department was a business that they were using to make money. So if the toxicologist is not running tests for other law enforcement agencies, and he's sitting in court, he's not making any money.
Right.
So because the defense bar is so ignorant, if they have the medical examiner sign the toxicology report, nobody would know any better, and they wouldn't object to Bayardo or Peacock or whoever testifying off the toxicology, even though it's a criminal fraud. And from 1990 until Bayardo left, that's what they did. And no defense attorney ever caught it. I brought it to the attention of Barry Scheck. Nothing.
You brought it to his attention
when? Yeah, sent him emails on it, pointed it out.
When?
Not only did I point that out, I pointed out that the autopsy of Ed Somala on the type document said it was performed by Tommy J. Brown, but the signature scribbled over Tommy J. Brown's type name is Bayardo's.
I showed that document in a previous broadcast,
right.
yes.
And I did research, and I dug deep, and I found that in the Travis County archives, from 91 to 98, there were 250 autopsy reports typed in the name of Tommy J. Brown that not one of them was signed.
By him?
By him. Always Bayardo's name scribbled over the type name. I then dug deeper and found a total of 1,200 autopsy reports in the Travis County archives in several medical examiners' names, with 2 people already executed on unsigned verified autopsy reports. Now in Texas, Tommy J. Brown was not a Travis County medical examiner. He was a medical examiner in Harris County in Houston.
Okay.
In Texas, it's unconstitutional for a medical examiner from one county to come to do an autopsy in another. Under our Constitution, it's Article 16, Section 40. It forbids holding 2 appointments for profit or that conflict at common law.
And this stands today?
And as it stands today,
okay.
And medical examiners are judges, and no judge is allowed to hold 2 appointments at the same time, but a JP, a Justice of the Peace. No other judge, not even the Supreme Court judges. And since the medical examiner Tommy J. Brown is from Houston, he's under the direction of the chief medical examiner there, Joe Chahemchak. Well, he can't be a deputy medical examiner in Travis County under Bayardo, because that has conflicting loyalties. He has 2 bosses. That's also forbidden as a conflict at common law under Article 16, Section 40 of the state's Constitution. Now, I raised the issue about medical examiners being judges.
Yes.
That is the crux of everything that fell apart in the Texas criminal justice part of our criminal justice system, the criminal part. You see, last Tuesday, in the Texas election, the voters approved an amendment to the Texas Constitution. It was called Proposition 5. Mm-hmm. What it did is it gave the Commission on Judicial Conduct authority over judicial candidates.
All right, so hold on. Before you go much further in this, let me ask you one thing here. You said you brought this information to the attention of the Innocence Project.
Yes.
How long ago did you first bring it?
Well, I started raising the issue of the retired judges assigned to Reed's case in the late fall of 2014, when I notified Barry Scheck and Quincy McNeil that
7 years ago.
7 years ago, when retired Judge Doug Shaver had signed Rodney Reed's first execution order. And I was advising Barry Scheck that he needs to appeal and strike the execution order, which he refused to do. So Rodney went from the fall of 2014 to February 20th, 2015, facing an execution order where he was set to be executed March 5th of 2015. Now, to make sure that I could document that I warned the Innocence Project,
yes,
I asked Quincy McNeil to file a records request with the Secretary of State and presiding judge of the region seeking Doug Shaver's oath of office for his assignments after he retired in 1999. This is 2015.
Right.
Quincy then, and I told Quincy that, I wanted him to forward me his answer so I could verify them against what I was getting to make sure the state was giving me the correct documents. That wasn't entirely truthful. I wanted documentation showing that he knew, and they were going to let Reed be executed.
Right.
So on February 20th, which was a Friday, 2015, I filed a complaint with the Commission on Judicial Conduct. On Monday, the 23rd, the Court of Criminal Appeals halted Reed's execution, citing the affidavit of Dr. Michael Botten that was given to the Innocence Project. That was given to A&E TV to be used in their February, I think it was 5th, 2015, 2-hour special on Reed. Well, I was the one that gave the file on time of death to A&E TV to give to Michael Botten. Why? Because in the 12, 13 years that Bryce was on the case, I was providing him documents, and for that whole time continued to tell him, you need to take this time of death file and give it to a competent medical examiner, because they will tell you that Stacy died in Giddings the night before, and it was her dead body that was transported to Bastrop County to frame Reed. He wouldn't do it. So in 2014, when A&E TV came to me, and it was Ryan Polonsky who did State versus Reed, who directed them to me, I opened my files, and I asked them when they came to my office, where are you going with this? Are you trying to prove Reed is innocent, guilty, or you don't care? It's just a good story. The producer says, oh, no, Dave, we want to prove he's innocent. And I said, that's what I wanted to hear. I'd already prepared a file for him. I gave it to him. I said, take this to any nationally renowned medical examiner and present it to him, and he's going to tell you to a medical legal certainty this girl died the night before at the hands of her fiancé, and it was her dead body that was brought here. And that's what he did. And I had them give it to Michael Botten specifically, and that's how Michael Botten came into this.
Okay.
And then when Michael Botten told him, when the producer called me, he says, oh my God, Dave, Botten said exactly what you said he was going to say. And I said, yeah, now give this to Kevin Gannon. He was one of the detectives with A&E TV, because Kevin Gannon was a retired New York detective and was in New York, where the Innocence Project is, where Bryce Benjett was. I asked the producer, give that Biden's findings, Boden's findings to Kevin Gannon, and have Ken and Gavin shove it up, Bryce Benjett's butt. And that's how Bryce Benjett suddenly became, oh my God, Reed is innocent based solely on time of death. Because if there was truly any DNA from Reed on Stacy's body, which I contend there never was, doesn't make any difference. It would have been consensual, because the only way Reed had sex with Stacy would have been, as he said, the night before, and she never showered, until he killed her, and then he brought her body. But if that happened, Stacy didn't tell anybody she was raped. So the only other time would be after she got off work that Monday, would have had sex with Reed before she went home. And again, she didn't tell anybody she was sexually assaulted. So again, it would be consensual.
Right.
Based on time of death. So it kills the DNA. And it's, like I said, he wouldn't do it. And so here we are, fast forward.
Yes.
You had the 2017 evidentiary hearing. The Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that Bryce Benjett, the Innocence Project, did not undermine Bayardo's credentials and qualifications and competency. Ergo, even as Michael Botten admitted that Bayardo had the better position on seeing the actual evidence, and they were relying off pictures, and a lot of them not so good a quality, so Bayardo wins on that confrontation.
Why is that important?
Well, because what Michael Botten and them are disputing Bayardo with is time of death that implicates the only person that could be the killer, and that's Jimmy Fennell. That's why it's so critical. So Rodney Reed gets a second bite of the apple.
Right.
This July, this evidentiary hearing. Now, with the Court of Criminal Appeals already laying the roadmap to the Innocence Project of how to defeat Bayardo's time of death and win the time of death argument and thus get Rodney a new trial or acquitted, they didn't do it.
How did the Court of Criminal Appeals lay that roadmap?
Well,
in your opinion?
it was in their opinion. They told them that in their findings that Bryce, the Innocence Project, did not undermine Bayardo's autopsy and testimony with Bodden's testimony. That Bayardo, since he was there present and did the autopsy, he had better view of the evidence than Michael Bodden did.
Okay.
And so unless you undermine Bayardo, then the forensic pathologist brought in by the defense, is second best evidence. Or as the Perry Mason series would tell you, it's not best, it's not best evidence. Bodden's testimony is not best evidence.
Right.
Bayardo's would be.
Right.
Unless you show that Bayardo was a liar, a fraud, an incompetent, a perjurer, a tamperer, then
any of the
change.
above or a combination.
Yeah. Now, I gave Vereshek all of that and more. You see, Bayardo testified at trial at the prompting of the Attorney General Lisa Tanner that he did Stacy's autopsy as the Travis County Chief Medical Examiner.
Well, wait, the then Attorney General, since she
she has been removed,
allegedly resigned or retired.
She really doesn't tell you how she went out the door, only that she did, and she wasn't happy about it. Right. And it happened 30 days after the hearing.
Which should have been still celebration time because they presented such a good case, right?
Yeah, well, you would think. But
right.
On top of that, this prosecutor, Lisa Tanner, is the foremost prosecutor at the Attorney General's office in the state. She's head of capital prosecutions for the Attorney General's office for the whole state of Texas. She's head of the public corruption division of prosecutors at the Attorney General's office. She is the big dog of big dogs of big dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes out the door, and everybody's going, did you see that?
Dixie.
I didn't see that. There's not a comment, not a celebration of her retirement, 30 years prosecuting, perfect case, never losing a case, executing dozens of people. Yay, go team, go. Nope. Not a cake, not even a muffin.
Mm.
Nothing.
I know some people that were rejoicing.
There were a lot of people that were celebrating, but none of them were with the state.
Yeah.
And you see, the state has a website.
Yes.
It's called the Texas District and County Attorney Association. It's a blog. And in this blog, they discuss cases. And Lisa Tanner was a big blogger on this site. Telling, county prosecutors the law, arguing cases. And when one of their big people retires, they celebrate it on the website. Everybody gives congratulations, not one word, not one mention of Lisa Tanner's name, not a nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Which tells anybody who knows anything about the state that she didn't go out the door willingly. And what sent her out the door was devastating to prosecutors. And so nobody wants to comment.
Mm.
Now, I talked to an attorney who had just had a major case that she was prosecuting. And he said, when I brought it to his attention that she was no longer with the AG's office, he said, yeah, I know, she called me. And I said, really? And what did she say? And he said she told him that she had to resign because she couldn't work for a corrupt attorney general like Ken Paxton, and I laughed.
What?
And I told him, that is the pot calling the kettle black. There is nobody more corrupt in Texas than Lisa Tanner. And I'm not saying that our Attorney General isn't a skunk. He is. But when it comes to polecats, you know, he's a Pepe Le Pew next to Lisa Tanner, who's just a good old West Texas polecat. The stink that you can't get off of yourself no matter what you try.
Right.
And this woman, everything she touches is a lie. She doesn't mind suborning perjury. She doesn't mind threatening witnesses. She does everything to win, and she doesn't care if you're innocent or not, and she doesn't care if you die or not. It's all about the win. And, of course, I'm curious as to exactly where she's going to go and what she's going to do. What can she do?
Right.
So, as of yet, you see nothing. Now, I did hear that she was at the closing arguments.
Yes.
And she was sitting at the prosecutor's table, passing notes to the prosecutor. Which means that they were paying her as a consultant. And trust me, I will pull the records and find out how much they paid her.
Because that should also be
It's
public
record.
information.
Yeah, I can get that. Most people don't know that that's how it would be done, but that's how it was done.
I comment here from Facebook Live. Hey, Josie, saying I also heard she mentioned a mental condition.
Yeah, Lisa. Yeah, Mitzi Wolf probably slapped her around for losing her job.
Only you, Fish.
If you haven't figured out my type of wit, you will.
Only you.
What medical condition could Lisa Tanner have other than choking on her own smell, being the skunk that she is? See, skunks aren't immune to being sprayed in the face by another skunk.
Right.
So, you know, she's susceptible to getting choked on her own stink from what she pulled. But let's talk about what could she have pulled that would have got her fired. So, Lisa Tanner also brought in 2 forensic pathologists to bolster what Bayardo testified at trial. One was the new Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Bexar County, that's in San Antonio, and the other one was Susanna Dana, who was a former Travis County Medical Examiner.
Right.
Several times, off and on. But here's a little stink on Susanna Dana. Starting in 1985, Susanna Dana was a Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Bexar County. She started letting Bayardo perform autopsies and type them in her name and scribble his signature over her typed name. I have numerous copies that go from 85 to 91. Now, when Susanna Dana in 92 came to Travis County as a deputy medical examiner, she was under the same contract that Travis County put Bayardo under. Now, for your listeners, if you want to see how skanky this stuff is, anybody can go online and do a search for this under this term, body of evidence. It's by KXAN TV out of Austin.
Yes.
I gave them the documents late 2015, early 2016. What this tells you is the county judge who signed Bayardo's contract in 92 did it because they discovered in late 91, 92 that Bayardo was pocketing the money that he was getting for doing autopsies for JP counties. In other words, he was running a private business out of the morgue, which is criminal. They should have prosecuted him instantly. Had they done, Michael Morton, who spent 26 years in prison for the murder of his wife that he was innocent of, that Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project finally got him out after 2006, would have been released in 1994, serving less than 4 years, because Bayardo did that autopsy illegally. But no, the Travis County Judge and Commissioners Court decided to codify Bayardo's fraud by putting him under contract to do the autopsies for JP counties as a private physician for $300, but not to disclose that to the JP counties, because they would not go along with it.
And that was what was shown in that body of evidence, and
that's what's shown in the body of evidence
on YouTube. I don't know. You find that anywhere.
Yeah.
Like Fish said, just do a search, do an internet search, body of evidence,
and you'll see it. And what it tells you is, over the 30 years that Bayardo was at the Travis County Medical Examiner's office, he made over $2.6 million in $300 illegal private autopsy fees. Now, to show you how this works, under our Code of Criminal Procedure, medical examiners are appointed county officials. All county officials in large counties over 20,000 people have to be paid a salary. Our Constitution forbids a county official from being paid any gratuity over their salary for statutory work that's covered under their appointment.
Right.
So all of these $300 payments are illegal under the state's constitution.
Okay.
But it's also a fraud on those JP counties, those Justice of the Peace counties, the district courts of those counties, and all homicide defendants. Because even though Bayardo and his deputies are doing the autopsies as private physicians for profit, they type the autopsy reports on Travis County official letterhead. They sign the autopsy reports as the medical examiner or deputy medical examiner, a county title, and the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office bills the JP County. Now, when the JP County pays that bill, the Travis County auditor then cuts Bayardo his $300 check for doing the autopsy as a private physician.
Right.
That is so criminal, it puts your butt in jail.
It should, but it hasn't.
And Tanner knew this. And so she's pumping Bayardo to testify at trial in '98 that he had the authority as the Travis County Medical Examiner to conduct the judicial inquest into Stacy's death and do her autopsy, which in fact the law absolutely forbids it. Medical examiners cannot perform autopsies for JP counties where the Justice of the Peace has authority. Otherwise, you have two judges presiding over the same death. It'd be like having two different judges in two different courts presiding over the same death penalty trial of the same victim and the same defendant. You can't do it in any state.
So here it is, yet again, something else the Innocence Project could have used in Rodney's defense.
I gave them all of this and pointed out to them that Bayardo committed perjury at the direction of Lisa Tanner when he testified back in 1998. That being raised alone is grounds for a new trial, period. And they wouldn't use it. But it gets worse. I went and filed new records requests with the auditor and obtained the auditor's payments to Bayardo for doing Stacy's autopsy as a private physician for $300.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave it to him. I also, the Susanna Dana, who Lisa Tanner brought to testify that Bayardo's time of death and everything he said was true, was also under those contracts when she was with Travis County and defrauding the JP counties. So there was a high-profile murder case in one of the adjacent counties that's under review that Susanna Dana did, and I pulled the invoices for that one and gave it to them too, that they could use this to go after the state's witness, showing that she was part of the same criminal fraud as Bayardo, and her testimony would be utterly void in this hearing because she was involved in a felony criminal fraud against J.P. counties under the direction of Bayardo while she was there. And they didn't use it.
More ammunition.
More ammunition that would have gotten Rodney a new trial, that they could use it in closing arguments, and they didn't.
Speaking of closing arguments, how interesting was it that same judge that said, no, you can't use this particular bit of information, allowed that little bit of information to be used in these closing arguments from this hearing back in July?
Yeah, well, see, everything that this judge did. In fact, he even hinted to everybody that Barry Scheck was part of this fraud of throwing Rodney under the bus.
How so?
During the evidentiary hearing from July 19th to 29th, Barry Scheck got into a confrontation with the judge. He started arguing very forcefully on Rodney's behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And it angered Judge Langley. And Judge Langley had this retort. Mr. Scheck, you're making it very difficult for me to rule in this case. What the hell does that mean? Was Barry Scheck arguing that he was going to take this to the Court of Criminal Appeals appeal before the judge ever got a chance to, to conclude it, which would be to make it difficult for the judge to rule on it because he's going to take it away from him? No, Barry Scheck wasn't doing that. Was Barry Scheck arguing too strong in Rodney's defense, which would make it impossible for Judge Langley to rule against him? Which is the only thing that makes any sense. And Barry Scheck didn't go, what the hell did you mean by that? Because if I had been a defense attorney and a judge suggested that I was arguing too strong for my client, that would prevent him from ruling against my client, well, I would definitely say, well, let's set the record straight here, Judge. My intention is to make it impossible for you to rule against my client.
Exactly.
But not Barry Scheck. He toned it down upon the judge and didn't challenge him anymore.
Which I know angered quite a number of people. There are comments on the Facebook Live right now.
How could anybody not read that as
crazy.
Being suspicious?
But everybody seems to have missed it, though, Dave. Everybody seems to have missed it. Well, most people seem to have missed it.
All the players missed it because they were part of the same game. The only people that get confused about, say, a basketball judge's ruling where the players are trying to shave the points for gambling, it's only the fans that are like, what watching. The hell's going on?
Right.
Because they're not part of the game.
Right.
So, and that's what you saw here. The spectators go, what the hell is going on? But the players were all on the same page. Now, that's what I read into it when I saw it immediately. Ooh, that's bad. That is really bad. And see, I'm watching as I said, at the beginning of the program. I warned everybody that listened to your program 2 years ago.
Yes.
This is exactly what I was expecting Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project to do to Rodney, was to pretend to represent him but maneuver him into an execution. And here we saw in that evidentiary hearing a very disturbing piece of evidence suggesting that Barry Scheck was working with a judge.
Right.
So we go forward. Now, I'm watching all of this, and as I see the testimony, then I go, since I have the master file, I pull the records and I email it to everybody on the Innocence Project. Barry Scheck, Andrew McRae, Quincy McNeil, for the most part, sometimes I send stuff to Quincy some night. He used to be a very good friend of mine for over a decade until I realized what a skunk he was.
Right.
And also to Kendall, to Potkin, who is the professor at the Cordova Law School in New York, one of the key members of the Innocence Project, to Jane Poocher, who is also a professor of law up at the Cordova Law School in New York, to Michelle Davis, who's on the Innocence Project, to George Kendall, who's this big, high-dollar criminal defense attorney who I think you could buy for a bubblegum wrapper based on what I saw of him.
Mm.
And all of these. And I copied them all, everything. And yet nothing. In their closing arguments, it was very apropos, just before Halloween.
Yes.
I mean, it was composed of nothing but boogers.
Mm.
Nothing. There was no argument for anything on Reed.
Right.
So, long story short, Shaver denies Reed, relief and recommends to the Court of Criminal Appeals Monday, November 1st, that he not be granted a new trial. Now, here's what I expect to happen.
That's Langley.
That's Judge Langley.
Right.
So here's what I expect to happen. Before Thanksgiving, the Court of Criminal Appeals will embrace Langley's findings, deny Rodney a new trial, and order Langley to sign a new execution order, which he'll sign for February, March of next year. That's their game plan. And then Tuesday, November 2nd, came along and train wrecked everything.
Now, that is where the legislature passed this
Yeah, that's
amendment.
where the legislature put an amendment before the voters.
Okay. I want
And
to
what
get to
the
the
voters
amendment.
did-
I want to
Yeah,
get
we're
to
gonna
that
get-
amendment, but
Yeah.
there's one little bit of Bayardo that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Because you mentioned him doing this for a very long time. And
30 years.
But so before we have talked on Bayardo, and we talked about his appointment,
Right.
which is also information that you relayed to
Okay.
me that you have passed on to the Innocence Project.
Right. Now, here's the deal. In Texas, medical examiners under our Texas Code of Criminal Procedure are appointed.
Right.
Now, what virtually nobody in Texas knows, and I mean, when I say nobody, I mean the public, I mean the defense attorneys, I mean the appellate attorneys, I mean judges, they don't know what the statute says.
Somebody has to know,
Yeah, well, this person knows.
other than you.
Not very many people, unless you tell them, they don't know. And that's what I do. Now, here's the deal. Under the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, the duty of a medical examiner is to conduct an inquest with or without a jury in all the deaths enumerated under the statute. And the statute lists every death but a natural death under a doctor's care.
Okay.
So a medical examiner is a judge who has to have a medical license. So if an autopsy is needed, he can do it himself. So he's best evidence because he's the one who's doing the autopsy, not another physician.
Right.
Now, so under Texas law, the imposed duty on a medical examiner and the deputy medical examiners are to conduct an inquest, with or without a jury, in all unattended deaths. Autopsies in Texas are discretionary. They're not required. They're a tool of an inquest. Now, years and decades ago, the Supreme Court ruled that a justice of the peace, and by extension, medical examiner, has no authority to order or perform an autopsy unless it's in connection with the inquest. If a medical examiner in a JP orders or performs an autopsy and does not conduct the inquest and write and file an inquest report, the autopsy was done without authority, which means it is illegal and it cannot be used in a criminal court of law against the defendant.
Mm-hmm.
See how it works?
Okay.
So, in Texas, for the last 30 years, I bet you I could count the total number of inquests by JPs and medical examiners combined on one hand. Now, the inquest report is an interesting record. It is a mandatory record because it is the first official record of the grand jury. That's why if you don't write the inquest report, the autopsy is void and you can't present it to the grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
So what has Texas been teaching medical examiners and JPs? Oh, is all you do is the autopsy. They tell JPs, oh, don't touch the body. Send it to your whatever medical examiner you want, which is illegal as sin in Texas.
And they've been doing this how long?
They've been doing this for 30 years.
Okay.
For more than 30 years. And as such, all the evidence is lost. Now, the inquest is also interesting in another aspect. The inquest is a civil right of a defendant. Because the statute allows the defendant and his attorney to be present at the inquest, introduce evidence as to the defendant's innocence, and cross-examine the witnesses. No defendant gets that right in Texas, and yet it is a constitutional right, and all unattended deaths must have an inquest. It is mandatory. It's not discretionary. And there's the train wreck. And so a medical examiner, see, Texas has an inquest statute like England, where the coroner is a judge who conducts a judicial inquest.
Okay.
Now, people who watch Perry Mason, most of those Perry Mason shows you see on late night TV
Yes.
are not trials, they're inquests, where you have the judge presiding over the case, and you have Berger saying, Your Honor, we have met our burden, we have shown a prima facie case to bind the defendant over for trial. That was an inquest.
Okay.
And see, in California, the old inquest was a civil right of a defendant. That's where Barry Mason was able to kill the indictment before the person was bound over to go to the grand jury.
Okay.
And that's the rule that Texas has for all unattended and homicide deaths. And yet no defendant gets that constitutional right. That's why we end up convicting innocent people and executing them. And so Texas has been a rogue machine in our criminal justice system, dispensing a lot of criminal and no justice. Which brings us back to November 2nd, our election.
Right.
And so now what we were talking about I know where you were headed with Bayardo. I just provided you something I just got out of the Travis County Commissioner's Court. It is the contract that the Commissioner's Court entered into with Bayardo in June 1978. June 30th, 78.
Okay, I'm going to put this up on the screen as you talk, so go ahead.
Okay, this is a document that probably nobody and no defense attorney has ever seen. Here now, for people in Texas and a lot of big Democrats, and especially Democrats who like, the comedian aspect of public officials, The person who moves that they offer Bayardo this contract with the Travis County Commissioners Court is a woman by the last name Richards.
Mm-hmm.
First name Ann Richards. Now, a lot of the listeners will recognize Ann Richards as the governor of Texas in the 90s who created the pun about George Bush as being born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Right.
And then went on to a comedian career as an ex-governor. Big, like Ma Parker, a lot of colloquial sayings and witticisms and the like. Well, this woman, Ann Richards, gave you this monster Bayardo by either hook or crook or negligence. She either didn't know what the hell she was doing or she deliberately did it. But what the records show is it's listed in the Commissioner's Court for June 30th, 1978 at 3 p.m. And it says, item 1, appointment of medical examiner. And then it goes forward. It says, Commissioner Richards recommended that Dr. Roberto J. Bayardo be hired as the permanent medical examiner for Travis County effective August 1st, 1978.
Right.
And that Dr. Bayardo has indicated that he is willing to come on a temporary basis for the period of July 1st through August 1st to be legally described as the medical examiner and fill in on those days when he is unable to be here.
Right.
Yeah. She requested that the Commissioner's Court, Commissioner Moya, address the question of the salary in association, not only with the temporary arrangement, but as far as a permanent arrangement with Dr. Bayardo, should she get a second on her motion. Commissioner Samuelson seconded the motion. Okay, exactly where in this does it say that Ann Richards moved that they appoint Bayardo the medical examiner?
Right. That wasn't there.
It's not there, and it never has been there, and they never appointed him. And it's that appointment that then makes Bayardo eligible to take the oath of office and become the judicial medical examiner. Now, this also goes to last week's November 2nd election in Texas. Mm-hmm. All of these things are coming together in one giant cabal. So, since Bayardo wasn't appointed, Bayardo was not the medical examiner. And this contract goes on to say that Bayardo gets the first $200 of every autopsy bill from the JP counties, and that it violates the Texas Constitution. That is illegal as sin.
Right, because that is there in the very next
paragraph. That's in the contract. That also, since this is basically an employment contract, that's telling him that he has to do autopsies for other counties and that he can skim the first $200 off to go into his pocket, constitutes a bribe. And it's illegal as sin. And it destroys everything he has ever touched, from the beginning until the end when he left. And that's what that body of evidence talks about, is the Commissioner's Court in 91-92 didn't know about this agreement in 78, which was illegal. So rather fix it, they codified it with a contract, which I have a copy of.
Right.
Where he does the autopsies as a private physician. And I gave this to Barry Scheck. Had they used it, Langley would have had no choice but to rule for a new trial. Now, since since Lisa Tanner suborned perjury by putting Norma Farley and Susanna Dana on the stand to
Yes.
buttress Bayardo's false testimony when they were part of the same criminal fraud as Bayardo was, and that Bayardo did Stacy's autopsy, meant she suborned perjury. Can you now see why she got fired? Because I tagged her on it.
Mm-hmm. You see, I asked that question so that these dots can be connected.
Right.
And I don't think just looking on at the case as it's presented or
No, you'd never know
hearing
any of this.
arguments that you're getting all of these dots being lined up or being connected at all.
Right. See, what I do is under the radar. And then I provide the records to the parties, like the Innocence Project attorneys. All were made aware of this before closing arguments, before they filed their finding of facts and conclusions of law. They had all of this. They could have used any and all of it. But you see, by documenting it at a time of my choosing, I can come back and bring criminal charges against everybody. And as I told y'all at your show 2 years ago,
Almost
that
to the day.
if Barry Scheck and company tried to throw Rodney under the bus, I would have a case built for a state bar grievance both in Texas and New York against everyone. And trust me, that's coming.
So with going back to Bayardo et al.
Okay.
And the legislature.
Yeah, let me wrap that up now. See, there were, some constitutional amendments as for Texas voters
On November 2, yes.
on November 2nd of this year, just last week.
Right.
Proposition 5 amended the Constitution to allow the Commission on Judicial Conduct that regulates judges to, for the first time, regulate judicial candidates, meaning non-judges. The voters passed that. Now, I don't think any of the judges in this state understood what that amendment did. But they're finding out now what it did pretty damn fast. For Judge J.D. Langley, it's the kiss of death. You see, when I filed on Doug Shaver in 2015 when he signed Rodney Reed's first execution order
Yes.
for not having executed the oath, the Commission on Judicial Conduct could not touch him because he wasn't a judge until he takes the oath. Our rulings in Texas are that judges who don't take the oath are not judges, and all of their acts are void and a nullity.
Mm-hmm.
So when a retired judge is appointed by the presiding judge to handle a case, like Shaver was to handle Rodney's case in 2014,
Yes.
he's only a candidate for the judicial, for that judicial office of a retired senior judge. You see, when a judge retires, he has to then take steps to place his name on the list of judges that can be appointed as a visiting judge to preside over a case where the trial judge is sick or has a conflict of interest and can't handle a case.
Got you.
Now, as a retired judge assigned to a district court case, that retired judge gets the salary, the daily salary of an elected district court judge, which is a lot of money. So these retired judges, they want to be assigned to as many cases as they can because they get lots of money.
Essentially. Got you.
Yeah, but here's the problem. They are, once they retire and they file the paperwork, placing their name in the hopper of probably 30 or 40 other retired judges, they become candidates to a judicial office through appointment. And now, for the first time, they're under the authority of the Commission on Judicial Conduct, whether they take the oath or not. Since Shaver never took the oath and was sitting on Rodney's case from 2014 to 2019, the Commission couldn't touch him because he didn't take the oath, because he wasn't a judge. And there's no way to get at him, a defense attorney or defendant, except one way.
And what is that way?
And that is when the judge makes a ruling to the Court of Criminal Appeals, Rodney's attorneys can file a motion to void and vacate the judge's ruling because he has not executed the oath. See, an appellate court, any appellate court, can remove a retired judge who hasn't taken the oath, who's trespassing on a judicial office illegally. But only an appellate court can do it. And the only chance a defendant's attorneys has to get at that judge is through an appeal of a ruling by the judge. And I brought this to Reed's attorney's attention.
So when they had gone ahead and filed that suggestion to when was that? Early last year?
Right, when they asked Judge Langley to recuse himself?
Yes.
No, because that wasn't in the form of a motion.
Right.
You have to file a motion. The judge denied the motion, then you appeal the motion.
Right, but that wasn't even in appellate court.
No, but you see, Judge Langley is placed over Reed's case for the benefit of the Court of Criminal Appeals, because the Court of Criminal Appeals can't take direct action against the defendant. It has to be a trial judge. And since Townsley Corbett recused herself, the presiding judge of the region appointed Langley to preside over Reed's case after Shaver left. But Langley never took the oath. So as all Rodney's attorneys had to do was file a motion for additional DNA testing, like on the belt, on new documents, on things that I've given them.
Right.
Langley would have promptly, ruled against them, and then the only place you can appeal Langley is directly to the Court of Criminal Appeals. And you would appeal and say that Langley's ruling on your motion, is void because he's never taken the oath for his assignment.
So
and a
Shaver
judge with
didn't
no
take
oath is an impersonator and has no authority, and all their acts are void and a nullity. And you have him, and he's gone.
So Shaver didn't take the oath, and Langley didn't take the oath.
Right. No retired judge anywhere in Texas has taken the oath since the last time the court ruled on this in 1999.
Now, Dave, that is saying that there are a whole lot of cases that have gone through Texas courts where the convicted can very well end appeal.
Oh, yeah. And Doug Shaver alone has 20 years of doing that.
But also, those that have gotten off, those felt that they were wrongfully deemed innocent, can also appeal.
Anybody who had a retired judge with no oath presiding over their case for any reason, civil, criminal, anything, divorce courts, all of those rulings are void. And if a retired judge with no oath signed your divorce decree, well, guess what? You're not divorced.
So,
and let me tell you, there's a lot of those. I do mean there are a lot. I have one that I'm working right now.
This is disastrous for Texas.
Huh?
But this is disaster for Texas.
No. This is what Texans are. We do everything big, including criminal frauds. We do it the biggest and the best of anybody.
So, all right.
That's being facetious.
Okay. Yeah, more fisher humor. So here, this amendment that got passed November 2nd, 2021.
Right.
How does that affect this? Because you said only in appellate court could
Okay,
could.
here's the deal. Up until last Tuesday, the Commission on Judicial Conduct only had authority over judges. This means people who are on the bench who have taken the oath.
Right.
If you're illegally on the bench having not taken the oath, the Commission on Judicial Conduct has absolutely no authority over you because you're not a judge. Under the Supreme Court's rulings for over 100 years in Texas. And that's what the retired judges, the game they have been playing for 20 years. You see, in 1999, the appellate courts, on remand from the Court of Criminal Appeals, ruled that a retired senior judge who did not take the oath, all of his official acts were void and a nullity. Immediately upon that ruling, all retired judges in Texas stopped taking the oath. We had what is better known as a good old Mexican standoff with the judges and our Constitution because nobody could touch them. And the judges, you see, this involved the district court elected judges who are requesting retired judges handle some of their cases. And the elected judges were protecting the retired judges, their old buddies. And this thing has turned into a giant cabal that just blew up in the judiciary's face. Had the judges realized what this amendment did, it had never got through the legislature. The judges would have thrown a wall-eyed fit. They would have threatened the legislature. They would have threatened everybody involved, and they'd have killed it. But they didn't see it coming. So they read this amendment as dealing with lawyers who were going to, for the first time, run for a judicial office that most likely was being held by a sitting judge.
Right.
And so to give the Commission on Judicial Conduct over these whippersnapper attorneys and hold them accountable for saying bad things about the elected judge, whether true or not, well, those judges were happy as hell to have the commission because those judges would be filing the complaints against those attorneys.
Right.
But you see, there's another side of that, in that a retired judge is a candidate for an assignment even before they do the oath. So suddenly, the Commission on Judicial Conduct has authority to cite judges who have been illegally sitting on benches having not executed the oath, like Shaver and Langley for the first time.
Well, look at that.
Oh, it's worse than just that. You see, the Commission on Judicial Conduct has the authority to go back as far back as they want. There is no statute of limitations, so they can go back after judges who are no longer judges.
Really?
Yes. So they can go back and whack the doggy-doo out of Shaver, even though he's retired and is no longer a judge, for everything he did for 20 years illegally on the bench.
Wow. So there should be a bunch of attorneys right about now just rubbing their hands together.
They don't know yet. See, I'm the only person out there that knows what the hell just happened.
What do you mean they don't know yet?
They don't know. I'm telling you. It's sad. So what I did, and you have a copy of it, and you can post it.
I'm putting it up right now.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I sent an email to one of the bar journals, Law 360, that submits stuff to LexisNexis.
Yes.
And they did a story about, Texas voters approving this amendment to the Constitution. And I told him in that email that, where your article is technically correct, you missed the two big issues.
Right.
One being that retired judges, are judicial candidates until they execute their oaths for their assignments. But for the last 20 years, no retired judge has executed their oath for those assignments. And it got so bad that J.D. Langley in 2019 filed a false order having an inmate executed in Texas for the first time on a void order by a non-judge. And then, miraculously, is rapidly appointed to represent over the Rodney Reed case. Mm-hmm. Now, both Rodney Reed and Swearingen in 2019 had the same attorney, Bryce Benjett, with the Innocence Project. And Bryce Benjett knew that J.D. Langley did not have an oath when he signed that order and could have appealed it and killed it. But he didn't, and when the co-counsel discovered this and brought it to Bryce's attention, he told the co-counsel that it was not a non-issue and not to file anything. Right. I know this because the co-counsel told me that's what happened. And he was sick when I told him, yeah, well, it's not true, and explained how it could be done. And he got very angry because he had been fighting on Larry Swearingen's case for a decade and a half, only to see his client executed on a void order, thanks to Barry Scheck's Innocence Project and Bryce Benjett. At the same time, Doug Shaver, with no oath on file, signs Rodney's second execution order. Now, because I knew about the game of not having any oaths and not being under the authority of the Commission on Judicial Conduct,
yes,
I figured that Shaver would try something different this time. So I was watching him online, and when I saw his name disappear from the approved list of retired judges, I immediately filed a Rule 12 judicial request for his resignation or retirement document filed with the presiding judge of the region. I received it. Handwritten, Shaver states to the presiding judge that he's afraid he's going to make a mistake on a major case. He's getting old. And even though he's still in excess health, not excellent, excess health,
mm-hmm.
he feels it necessary to step down right after he signed Reed's execution order. Nobody knows this except me. And I go to my old favorite, KXAN,
right,
and give them the letter. They publish it, and there's a firestorm, and Shaver's execution order is stayed. But Bryce was going to let him be executed on a void order by a judge who declared mental incompetency after he signed the order. That's how bad it is. So that's why I was warning 2 years ago that I suspected that Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project, this was deliberately done. It wasn't under Bryce's, creative mind,
mm-hmm.
that it went deeper. And that's when I told your listeners I would be watching, and I would be laying landmines and bumps in the road for the next 2 years leading up to Rodney Reed's new evidentiary hearing. And that's exactly what I've been doing. And in the legislature, I've been campaigning to the legislature for, almost a decade about this problem with judges and oaths. And so they finally took action.
So,
and I mean that I had to keep my damn mouth shut, which is difficult, so as not to alert the judges exactly the implications of how much power they gave to the Commission on Judicial Conduct.
Well, know that the amendment has been passed.
Oh, yeah, it's part of the Constitution. There's nothing they can do except duck and cover.
So, all right. You pointed out, and I put up on the screen just now the whole letter to the
email,
to the newsroom,
the body of the email.
Yes, right. And So anybody that wants to read that whole document can go back and pull up this broadcast,
And you will see
and
that it
you
went
read
out
it.
to all members of the Innocence Project for Rodney.
Yes. Let me see if I can pull that up on the screen neatly. There we go. Sent Monday, November 8th. Let me go ahead and put that up on the screen also.
Yeah, that went out today, this afternoon.
Right. So this is brand new information.
This is so new that still 99.9% of attorneys don't know anything about this. But this is a law journal. I also sent it to the American Bar Journal as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they have it. Now, there are two cases that I cite in here that anybody can go online and pull up. Preto Bell Bonds versus State and French versus State. These are the two hammers. French versus State says a judge cannot become an officer de jure or de facto without first taking the oath. Now, what that means is, in Texas and in the United States, this is federal law too, that a person elected or appointed to a government position, even though they don't follow the constitutions and solidify their election or appointment by taking the oaths or what are posted in the bonds, and they can be ultimately removed, whatever official acts they've taken under the authority of color before their removal,
Mm-hmm.
the federal courts and the state courts will defend their actions as a de jure or de facto officer. That includes every elected appointed official in Texas except judges. Judges are different. A judge has to first take the oath of office before they have any authority. They cannot become a de jure or de facto judge by simply being appointed or elected to the office. If they don't take the oath, everything they do is void and a nullity. The reason there's that difference is there are no other elected or appointed officials who solely have the authority under their own power to deprive a citizen of liberty or property, but a judge does. The governor can't do it, the lieutenant governor can't do it, no senator, no House member, nobody. They can do it as a body, but not as an individual. But a judge, as an individual, can take a citizen's liberty, have them locked up, and seize their property. That's
Right.
why judges have to first take the oath before they have any authority.
And here we have two that we know of.
Right. Trust me, there are lots and lots and lots and
Yeah.
lots and lots.
But we know
So-
of these two courtesy of
Yeah, these
Rodney
two
Reed.
on Rodney these two guys are acting as if they are the hangman for the judiciary to go around the state and sign execution orders having no authority to execute inmates. These two are the worst of the worst of the worst. If this was Nazi Germany, you're talking about Joseph Mengele and Goebbels from the SS. These are the people who, without authority, without position, will take the life of a defendant and smile about while they're doing it. There's no other way to look at these two guys. They know what they're doing, and they're deliberately doing it. And they take great pleasure, and they're being paid as an executioner to, in essence, murder people without authority. And Larry Swearingen's death was a homicide. And let me tell you, it will come back to get Langley. Because the Commission on Judicial Conduct has authority to go back now and tag these judicial candidates who didn't take the oath. Now, here's the conundrum for Langley. now that he's probably just now figuring out and being told that the commission can get him for not taking the oath. And if anybody out there is reading this online, I direct your attention to the last paragraph.
Let me pull it back up.
Yes. And here's what it says. The Innocence Project had the ability under the Texas Constitution to attack Senior Judge Langley's right to the bench by appealing Langley's evidentiary hearing findings to the Court of Criminal Appeals on the grounds Langley has not taken the constitutional oaths for the appointment to Reed's case. But it appears that they would rather see Rodney executed like they did with Larry Swearingen.
Mm-hmm.
So I've thrown the gauntlet down to Barry Scheck and his cronies and put it out to the public and to defense attorneys and to the defense bar across this nation that Langley is not a judge. Everything he did is void and a nullity. And under Preto bail bonds versus State, the other case that was ruled in 1999, the court found, and rubber stamped by the Court of Criminal Appeals, our Supreme Court for criminal cases, that retired senior and visiting judges must take the oath for every assignment because that's an appointment under our Constitution.
Right.
And if they don't, all their acts are void and a nullity. And of course, how did Preto, the appeal in that Preto bail bonds case, how did that ruling come about? It's very simple. After the judge made his ruling, the attorneys representing the bonding company appealed. And first, the Eighth Court of Appeals ruled with the judge, and they appealed it to the Court of Criminal Appeals. The Court of Criminal Appeals then remanded it back to the appellate court, the Eighth Court of Appeals in El Paso, and told them to read, I think it's Davis versus State or Wilson versus State, one of their old rulings.
Mm-hmm.
And upon reading that ruling, which was one of the findings about oaths and judges, that the Eighth Court of Appeals came back with the current Preto ruling that retired judges have to take the oath of office, or all of their oaths or all of their actions are void. Now, the state appealed it back to the Court of Criminal Appeals. They refused to hear it, which means they rubber-stamped what the Eighth Court of Appeals found. And that has been the law since 1999, and that's when all the retired judges stopped taking the oath. So you see the trick. So here is the way, and I've told Bryce Benjet and Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project, all of them, the only way you can go after Langley is you have to appeal one of his rulings and raise the issue that his ruling is void because he's never taken the oath. And that's the way to do it. And that's always been the way to do it.
Right.
But Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project is not trying to prevent Rodney's execution. They are not trying to prove he's innocent. They are merely going through the motions in order to get him executed. And, which just annoys the crap out of me, and I have to be honest, everybody, the Reed family will not take a phone call from me.
Mm.
You see Roderick, you see Rodney's mother, Sandra, you see them saying, oh, we put our faith in God, and the Innocent Project, they represent Rodney. The Innocence Project does not represent Rodney. They are as bad as every other attorney who has ever represented Rodney. Their job is to convict him and to execute him, and you see it in everything they've done. And I'm sorry, this is my opinion, but tell me where they have followed the guidelines of the Court of Criminal Appeals rulings that have denied Rodney relief, for 24 years. Look at the records. Look at what they have. Look at the body of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
That Bayardo was running a private business out of a judicial office. That would put anybody in any other state in jail for 20 years. And yet, Rodney's attorneys won't raise it. And it's not just Rodney. Look at all of the people who have been executed. Now, there are two people executed out of Travis County, one in 98 under George Bush when he was governor, the second one in 2003 under Rick Perry.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases, the autopsies were performed by Bayardo, but he typed them in other medical examiners' names. Now, when Bayardo is confronted with this about the other, the autopsy being prepared allegedly by Susanna Dana in San Antonio or Tommy J. Brown in Houston,
yes,
he tells the press that he was on vacation.
So okay, let's go with that. Why is he signing it?
Well, he can't. You see, that's the trick. He stumbles into these things, and the district attorneys, they don't know what they're doing. I do. In this 1990 case where I found that Bayardo then suddenly started signing the toxicology reports, well, that case is a bigger case than that, and that's why I dug into it. The autopsy is typed in the name of the chief medical examiner of Houston, the one whose Bayardo's related to marriage with, and who put Bayardo here under false credentials. So at the trial, Bayardo's going to testify, but the autopsy report's typed in the name of Joe Jahimchek, chief medical examiner from Houston. So the defense attorney says, Your Honor, we object to Bayardo testifying off this case. We're relying on the state's subpoena. We want the pathologist from Houston who did the autopsy here. Well, the district attorney goes, You're relying on my subpoena? And the defense attorney says, Yeah, he served, didn't he? Then the defense attorney says, Your Honor, we need to have a conference. Oh, yeah. So the judge allows Bayardo to testify by arguing that the autopsy report is a public record, and public records can be introduced into evidence on their own standing as a public record. But there's the problem. The public record is not signed by the person who allegedly did the autopsy, and Bayardo has just testified he was on vacation, which means he can't verify it or testify off of it because the person who did it hasn't signed it.
Right.
See the conundrum? And so they pretend like they don't know that that's not Jahimsek's signature, and they let Bayardo testify. But he's done that forever. Now, in 2007, that became a problem because I had pulled another 1990 autopsy of a woman who was bludgeoned to death and raped in a county east of Austin, Fayette County.
Yes.
Now, the autopsy was done in 1990. In 2007, 17 years later, I filed a records request for a copy of that autopsy report. Well, the district attorney of Fayette County asked the medical examiner's office to withhold that report from me. And I thought, what? So I called the DA's office in Fayette County and asked them, why are you sealing this 17-year-old autopsy from me? You know what the DA told me?
What's that?
Dave, we just got DNA evidence, a hit on the DNA evidence from this rape case. He says, I'm right now drafting the indictment. And I said, really? I said, do you have that autopsy report handy? He says, yeah, right here on my desk. I said, why don't you give me your fax number? I'm going to fax a couple of records to you. I said, now the fax cover sheet will have my contact information because after you look at these records, you might want to call me. So I faxed him some documents. About 20 minutes later, I get a call. The DA is in panic mode. He goes, Dave, do you know where this pathologist is that did this autopsy? I said, I do. I said, why? What's the problem? Well, it doesn't look like he signed it. And I said, bingo, that's what I was looking for. See, the autopsy's typed in, again, the chief medical examiner of Houston, Jahemchek. But the signature scribbled over the top of Jahemchek's name is Bayardo's in a non-legible manner. Now, I sent that district attorney the true copy, of a signature from Jahemchek,
yes,
to verify against the one that signed on that autopsy report, and he recognized that's not Jahemchek's signature. So I said, yeah, that's what I was looking for. And he gets a little frustrated. He said, are you going to tell me where he is? And I said, oh, absolutely, I'm going to tell you where he is. I said, no, before that I said, so you got your DNA during the autopsy? And he said, yeah. And then he says, are you going to tell me where he is? And I said, absolutely. He's in a cemetery in Houston. And he goes, oh, shit. I said, yeah, no chain of custody. Can't introduce the DNA evidence. The rapist walks, and they drop, and they never indicted him. Because of this scam.
So it works both ways. And I'm glad you told that story because I want people to understand.
Oh, wait.
You said it earlier.
No, there's more to this story. Oh, there's a bigger piece to this story. Oh, my God, yes. Originally, in 1991, the DA indicted a black guy and charged him with committing this rape. Guess who was assigned to represent that black defendant? Calvin Garvey and Lydia Clay Jackson.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. You see how incestuously crazy this is?
Oh, no.
And if not for the African ministers in Fayette County, that guy would have been convicted and probably executed long before I found out about these pieces. And so now, 17 years later, they got a hit on the true rapist and couldn't touch him because of this scam that Travis County was running with Bayardo performing autopsies and typing the reports in other people's names.
Talk
about crazy, huh?
It like you said earlier, like everyone has heard as it relates to Texas, they do things big in Texas. Everything is bigger in Texas. This is ridiculous because you're talking about fraud at the highest level that there can be.
This makes Russia and China's criminal justice system look honest. And Texas is the second largest state, both in size and population, and has a constitution and the way it's approached as if it was in the 1850s under George Roy Beam, law west of the Pecos. And these cowboy judges, like Langley and Shaver, they don't care. In fact, just to show you how far back my records go.
Yes.
In 1964, when Kennedy was assassinated, Doug Shaver, as a law student in Houston, was interviewed. I have that interview with his picture.
Yeah. Fisher, you go way back.
I tell you, I dig. Because I want to know everything about these people so that I can try to anticipate what they're going to do next. That's why I studied Lisa Tanner so intently. So when it came time to start driving her into a corner, I knew how to do it. And that's what I've done. I have filed records requests.
Yes.
Forced Lisa Tanner to to go to the Attorney General's office requesting that they seal records from me because it would interfere with her ability to prosecute Reed's appeal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, because these are falsified records that she tampered with. But in order to prove that she did this and she knew the significance, I had to get her on record admitting that if these things were released to me, that she couldn't prosecute Rodney's appeal.
Right.
He would be acquitted. What she didn't know is I already had those records when I filed a request for them. I just needed her to put in writing what would happen if they gave them to me. And I've done that to her half a dozen times. And Baryshek has this. I sent you some high-quality photos.
Yes.
For you to show you what I'm talking about. In the crime scene video that of the DPS processing Stacy's body where it was found out in the country,
mm-hmm.
Stacy has some blue slacks on. She's got some turquoise, green, teal greens, light-colored panties.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a HEB shirt in the pickup. Now, these records that you have, I obtained from the DPS crime lab in January of this year, 23 years after they were collected. You'll be able to see on these garments the state's case number of Stacy Stites murder. Starts with an L2949 something or other. You're going to see
246937.
Right. And then you're going to see WY. That stands for Will Young, the serologist who tested and collected the DNA.
Right.
And then you're going to see a number, 50396.
Right.
Now, Stacy's body was found at 3 p.m. on 4/23/96. There were two women murdered in identical manners, about 10 days apart. The second one was Marianne Alt. Marianne Alt went missing on 5/3/96. The clothes on Stacy are Marianne Alt's. That's why the jeans aren't buttoned, because Marianne Alt was a much slimmer woman. So they couldn't button these. The panties belonged to Marianne Alt. Now, Marianne Alt was a woman who had been in a 10-year common law marriage with a wealthy man who was 10 years older than she was. When they first joined into this common law marriage, and they told everybody, they represented out to everybody that they were common law married for that 10 years. The victim, Marianne Alt, was 23.
Mm-hmm.
Her common law husband was 33. 10 years later, in 96, April, May 96, she was 33. Her common law husband was 43. And he had found a younger woman, and was dissolving his common law marriage with Marianne Alt, who was threatening to sue him for half his estate under the common law statutes in Texas, which she could do.
Right.
Well, he wasn't having none of this. Now, here's where it gets twisted, as all cases that I get involved in always have. So here's the twist.
Mm-hmm.
Through that 10 years that Marianne Alt was involved in that common law relationship, she was seeing a guy on the side.
Who was that guy?
A man who was younger than her. In fact, when she started this relationship, that young man was 13 years old in junior high. And so, as the evidence shows, the common law husband Not only did he want his common-law wife dead so she couldn't take half his estate, he wanted that young whippersnapper, Chart, who had been bedding his common-law wife for 10 years, charged with her murder. That's right. So, after the common-law marriage dissolved, and the older guy's, sleeping with his younger girlfriend, that leaves Marianne Alt to openly sleep with her now, 23-year-old boyfriend.
Right.
What she didn't apparently understand, is her common-law husband, when she came back from those dates, was collecting her clothes with the semen from their relationship. You see, the 23-year-old didn't have a place to go, nor did she, because he was married and his wife was pregnant at the time. So he was stepping out on his wife. So a lot of their sex was truck sex.
Okay.
And so her garments had his DNA, semen, and bodily fluids all over them. And that's what they put on Stacy. The DNA that the state has been using is between Rodney and Stacy is actually the DNA between David Lawhon and Marianne Alt. How I came to that is that we had this high-profile case with the beer cans.
Right.
In this January, again, of 2021, I received a bunch of evidence. And what I received was a handwritten note from that serologist, Will Young, whose initials are on all of the DNA for Stacy.
Right.
He was the one who tested all of it.
Right.
And in this note, he's writing it to his boss, Irma Rios, telling her that he just got the results on these beer cans. Now, this letter,
we had shown that.
Note,
we had
yes,
shown
that's
that.
right. And that was done May 13th, 1998, on the off day before the last day of trial where Rodney's DNA expert's going to testify.
Right.
And he says that he got the results on the beer can. She needs to come over and take a look at them, make whatever changes she needs to make, and fax it to Mitzi Wolf and Lisa Tanner at the DA's office in Bastrop before 9 a.m. on the last day of trial, which
is why he didn't sign it.
From the lab report shows that she did. Now, Tanner, at that evidentiary hearing in 2001, testified that she could prove that the proof that she gave that lab report to the defense is that there are bait stamp numbers on the record.
Mm-hmm.
And if she wanted to hide a record from the defense, she wouldn't bait stamp it. And she says, as you can see by the bait stamp number, she had given over 3,000 records to the defense by that time. You know what the problem with that is? It's not the bait stamp numbers for Rodney's case. They're not Rodney's bait stamp numbers. Rodney's bait stamp numbers are an ink wheel, a stamp where you turn the wheel, change the number, stamp it in an ink pad, stamp it on the paper.
Right.
The ink stamper that was used all through Rodney's case has 6 wheels. So every document has 6 digits on the stamp, and they're the ink blotter stamp.
Right.
Most of them are 3 zeros and 3 numbers. The highest that Rodney's bait stamp ever got was in 2008 before the first big evidentiary hearing.
Yes.
When the records got up to 1,400. The bait stamp numbers on this lab report on the beer cans are over 3,000. And they're typed numbers. They're not ink wheel numbers. So they're not from Rodney's case. So I went digging and found the bait stamp number sequences that were being used are from David Lawhon's file, which means that's where this lab report was put, because the DNA on that lab report is David Lawhon's on those beer cans.
That's where it belongs.
And that tracks backwards. They were trying to frame David Lawhon for both murders at the time. Lawhon would only plead guilty to Marianne Alt's murder, which he didn't do. He wouldn't plead guilty to Stacy's. After months of building a case against Lawhon, they had to reverse directions and go after Reed, but they've already submitted the DNA. So they just changed the names. Use the same numbers, just change the names. Goes from David Lawhon's DNA to Rodney's, goes from Marianne Alt's DNA to Stacy's. Yeah. And I gave them all of this in the documentation. And as you put up there, everybody can see that date of death on those clothes is the date of death for Marianne Alt, not Stacy Stites.
Yeah. They're all 5'3".
All 5'3", and 5'3" is the date that Marianne Alt went missing. They found her body 2 weeks later, which would be skeletonized, 7 miles from where Stacy's body was dumped. Same MO, one earring missing, just like with Stacy. T-shirt pulled off. Now, and this one is just beyond me. They say that she was sodomized after death like Stacy. Really? You can tell that after 2 weeks? Because I'm telling you, they couldn't tell that with the woman in Montana or in Wyoming, Petito.
2 minutes to the top of the hour. 1 second, Fish. Because we may run a little bit over tonight, just a little bit. I want to thank my affiliates. One Harmony Radio out of the UK, NIE Radio out of New Jersey, Island Worldwide out of New York, Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com out of South Florida, out of Texas, Allowap Radio, Dusic Media Groups, and WGLRO. Thank you very much. And to all my listeners everywhere else that are getting this broadcast by affiliates, thank you very much. And for those locked in here at the home of the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment on kevinstew.com, thank you very much. And those locked in on TuneIn Radio also, thank you. Remember, you can catch this broadcast by podcast and also by YouTube, and all the links will be available on kevinstew.com by morning Eastern time. So you can go back to this any amount of times you want. The podcast is The Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. The YouTube is of the same name. But never fear, kevinstew.com is here. Go there. Yes, Fish.
Okay, let's kind of pull this stuff together, because there's a little bit more that the vote did when they gave the Commission on Judicial Conduct authority over judicial candidates.
Yes.
That includes retired judges who are candidates for an assignment as a retired judge. It also gets another level of judges. That affects the Reed case. Medical examiners in Texas are judges. But those medical examiners have refused to take the oath, and thus the Commission on Judicial Conduct has never addressed medical examiners. But this opens the door to medical examiners too. And
right.
It gets pretty bad, because starting in 2009, I started making medical examiners take the oath of office. And I've gotten all of them to take the oath, except the two big ones, Houston and San Antonio. Well, guess what? Now that refusal since 1956 and 58 is coming home to roost. Because everything those offices have touched is now void. And as you know, Kevin, Houston, Harris County is the death capital of the United States. There have been more people executed out of Houston probably in the whole rest of the United States combined. And all of those convictions with autopsies done by that Harris County Medical Examiner's Office are null and void. And that includes, for people out there that remember, James Byrd out of Jasper, Texas. His autopsy was done by Tommy J. Brown. The very Tommy J. Brown who falsified the autopsy in the Ed Somala case. Again, in Texas, frauds are done big. And if you remember, James Byrd was the black male who was chained to the back of a pickup
And dragged,
and
yes.
drugged through the pines of southeast Texas. And 2 white supremacists have already been executed for his murder. Oh, but wait a minute. Neither one of those guys had anything to do with his death. It was the roommate and his brother who roomed together with those 2 white supremacists. It was the 2 brothers who killed James Byrd and blamed it on their white supremacist roommates. And the state had them executed. Why? Oh, because white supremacists, it's easy. Black man drugged to death in East Texas. White
Right.
supremacists did it.
Right.
KKK. Yeah, well, not so fast. That's how bad this is. Now, with these 2 big medical examiners' offices that have failed to take the oath, there are 3 where the medical examiners are not U.S. citizens, and they're 3 big offices: El Paso, Fort Worth, and Austin. Those medical examiners are not U.S. citizens. In the United States, every judge of every stripe, from the lowliest traffic court judge to the highest Supreme Court judge, must be a U.S. citizen, including medical examiners. Now, the worst of the bunch is the Fort Worth or Tarrant County medical examiner, who is a Pakistani national with dual British citizenship, who's been in the United States for 42 years under a falsified green card, acting as a medical examiner, and this is the guy who did the Waco Branch Davidian autopsies. Now, that happened in 93. If people don't remember that, this is where the ATF raided a religious group by the name of the Branch Davidians and drove tanks through the building that had almost 100 men, women, and children, and 80 plus of them all died. And this guy who's not a citizen, who was a fraud, did the autopsies through his private corporation, not professional association, which is a felony for a corporation to practice medicine in the state of Texas, and got away with it up until now. It wasn't but just a couple of months ago that I received records from the district attorney's office showing this guy was not a U.S. citizen. Shocked the hell out of everybody, including the deputy medical examiners had worked for him for decades. Never saw it coming. Well, last week, that commissioner's court just appointed the deputy chief medical examiner of Austin to be the new chief medical examiner of Fort Worth,
Right.
with a salary in excess of $565,000 a year, almost twice what any other medical examiner makes in Texas, and higher than any medical examiner in the United States or the world. And yet this guy has no training in pathology or forensic pathology according to his medical license, which tells me he flunked his pathology and forensic pathology boards, which is something you have to disclose, and he hasn't done that in the last 10 years that he's been a medical examiner. And I've already started pulling cases where he testified and notifying the defense attorneys who are now drafting writs to find out if he committed perjury and withheld that evidence that he has been declared incompetent in the fields of pathology and forensic pathology.
So wait, let me
I know.
let me point this back to where we started, or try to. You're saying that because of you butting into Rodney Reed's case where he's accused of the death of Stacey Stites, the whole state of Texas is now on notice?
Oh yeah, this is like starting to peel the layers of a bad onion. And it's just one layer after another, after another, after another, until you get to the core of the whole system and find out it's all rotten. Always has been. And the state hasn't cared. And the worst of the worst are judges. This is all run by the judiciary. The whole Texas criminal justice system has been bastardized by judges.
Fish, how do you plan to navigate the streets of Texas, being a Texas resident?
Carefully.
That's nuts, because you have just exposed the Texas.
Starting
You have
the process.
exposed
Starting the
Texas.
process. Now, let's see, how those who have set themselves out there in front of the press and the world to be the defenders, of the innocent, like the Innocence Project, let's see if they can pull their ass out of the gutter, pardon my French, and actually do what they profess to do. And we're going to find out really, really fast. Because as I said, it is my prediction that if the Innocence Project does not immediately file an appeal of Shaver's finding of facts, in the Rodney Reed evidentiary hearing, before Thanksgiving, the Court of Criminal Appeals will embrace Shaver's findings and order him to sign the next execution order for Reed, and he will be executed.
Maybe not if this information gets out
Yeah,
to
right. Well,
everyone.
like I said, I put some bumps out there, but that's the game plan. And
Right.
like I said, if they don't file immediately, then the Court of Criminal Appeals probably, not a guarantee. There's a lot of stuff's in play. The Court of Criminal Appeals might be a shot across the bow, and they go, ooh, we have some judges that are up for election next year on this court, Republican judges. Yeah, it might not be a good idea, because there's still a lot of time for Democratic judges to announce to run against us once they find this stuff out. And next year's midterms are going to be ugly.
Right.
Nationwide, they're going to be ugly. So, there's a lot at play here. A lot of stuff is coming to a head, at the time to form this perfect storm. And of course, what I've always told people, what I do is like Wile E. Coyote, taking that snowball up on the top of the mountain and rolling it down and expecting it to hit the roadrunner. Well, once that snowball starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it takes on a life of its own.
Right.
And nobody can predict where it goes. It can get everybody. It can get me. It can get the state. It can get everybody. Because once this cabal gets rolling and gets bigger and bigger, it's harder and harder to control.
It's a juggernaut.
And so, so there is no way to actually predict when, what, where, or how. You only know for certain something big is coming.
Well, something big has always been here. That much we know.
Right.
From the hiding of evidence to the covering up in this case to the planting of evidence, we know that something big has been there.
And see, some of the one of the biggest changes in all of this, I mean, you have the new amendment to the Constitution, and now people have a way to go after these retired judges. Anybody who had a retired judge presiding over their case, where they were convicted or whatever, can can file a request with the Secretary of State to find out if that judge had any oaths on file when he presided over their case. If he didn't, they can file a complaint with the Commission on Judicial Conduct.
When you say anybody,
Anybody, any defendant,
any Joe
even those that
Schmo,
are still in jail,
any regular person,
any regular person can get the records for their judges, and if they find that their judges didn't have the oaths, they can file a complaint with the Commission on Judicial Conduct. They can also file, if necessary, a pro se appeal to the courts, notifying the appellate court, the Court of Criminal Appeals, that their judge didn't have an oath, and thus his ruling against them was void and a nullity, and the Court of Criminal Appeals would have no choice but to dismiss the charges against the defendants. But I'm going to tell you, because those defendants can now sue the counties that prosecuted them, that convict them on the order of a void judge, they can sue for every day that they've been illegally in jail since that conviction, until that conviction's overturned.
Because of that,
Yeah,
Dave,
because
I'm worried that somehow, somewhere there, because there's always a loophole. I'm worried that there will be a loophole.
There's not, because the law that Texas has is the law that all states have, and the federal government has, and so you can't have Texas change the law to protect all of the illegal judges without causing a ramification all the way through the system. And remember, when J.D. Langley signed that execution order for Larry Swearingen, well, that the Innocence Project filed an appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court to try to stop the execution.
Right.
Now, nobody told the Supreme Court that this judge didn't have any oaths, because the Supreme Court would have gone crazy. Well, the Supreme Court still finds out that they rubber-stamped an execution on somebody whose order was signed by a judicial impersonator. I'm going to tell you, it's still going to piss off the judges on the U.S. Supreme Court, who will probably call in the FBI to investigate and prosecute anybody who was involved in that fraud on the Supreme Court of the United States. You beginning to see how this thing gets out of control real fast? Because so many courts have a dog to hunt in this now.
Everybody has something in
the
this.
judges on the Fifth Court of Appeals in New Orleans.
Everybody
they
has
gamed
something.
the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah,
Hey.
when you start, the more you dig into this, the more levels of corruption you find, just like that bad onion.
So, based on this vote, this this amendment,
That little amendment that everybody, now attorneys who run for judgeships have to face the Commission on Judicial Conduct if they say something off-colored about the sitting judge. That's the least of the state's worries.
but no, this gives Rodney Reed again new hope.
Oh, not only new hope, it's because, remember, it starts with Judge Langley and his ruling against Rodney on the evidentiary hearing. So it strikes the evidentiary hearing, strikes all the findings, and at minimum you go back to, November 2019 when he was assigned.
At minimum.
So you turn the clock back to 2019. Well, because the Commission on Judicial Conduct has no statute of limitations, and they can go after judges that are no longer on the bench, well, Doug Shaver never had an oath. And he denied Rodney's evidentiary hearings and everything that go all the way back to 2014. So now you take Rodney's case back to 2014. And this gets to the Supreme Court rulings, too, because the Supreme Court can't rule on things that have been stricken as illegal, that started in the Texas courts. because everything the Supreme Court rules off of has to work its way through Texas first.
Right.
So it reverses all the Supreme Court's denial of DNA testing and everything. You start beginning to see how big this goes. And because medical examiners are judges and Bayardo never took the oath, and his so-called appointment is a contract that's predicated on bribery, then it kills everything Bayardo ever touched, including the autopsy and findings on Stacy's death.
But
and not just Rodney's case.
Yeah.
It goes back and it changes everything in the Michael Morton and Anthony Graves cases.
It touches Ed Salmela also.
Ed Salmela, the family, oh yes. And not just Ed Salmela, but Gary Joe Bryant out of Giddings, who was also murdered because he was looking at Fennell.
Yes.
And these other cases where Anthony Graves and Barry Scheck both got monies for illegally being incarcerated. Well, if their incarceration was built on a fraud, they can come back and sue for punitive damages against the state, and there's no cap on those at $89,000 a year.
So I don't see, as rich as the state of Texas is, I don't see them having this much money to be able to finance all these suits.
No, it's easy.
And claims.
There's a worldwide gas shortage. We just start charging Yankees, $200 a gallon.
You know what?
I told you about my humor there.
But on the negative side of all of this too comes, if Rodney rightly gets out, there is still no justice for Stacy as at yet.
Oh, no. Oh, you're wrong. Because, see, here's what happens. When a cabal of this nature starts to crash, and see, the other part of this was Lisa Tanner being shown the door. How long do you think people like David Ward and others are going to sit on their hands and go, okay, do I just keep my mouth shut and wait till the FBI knocks on my door for all the perjury and all that I was involved in? Or is it better I be the first one to turn state's evidence and get immunity?
Leniency.
Yes. And see, that's what I wrote in my letter to the editor on August 23rd, 2001, when I reported that my findings were Stacy had been dead almost 24 hours when they found her body in Bastrop, meaning she died in Giddings. And this article, this letter to the editor was titled "A Come to Jesus Calling," because the DA had announced he was going to run for another term. And then about the time that the articles get ready to come out that I worked with the newspaper on, the DA did an about face and decided he was not going to seek another term, and said that he had a come to Jesus calling. And so I wrote the letter to the editor stating that one normally uses that term when one is at the end of one's life, or they're about to redress a major wrong done to another. And where I had no information, or did I suspect that there was any medical issue here with the DA, if it's about a major wrong done to another, then I could probably shed some light on that. And then I explained how I got into the Rodney Reed case and my findings. And then I closed it off by saying that, for those, that I had already talked to the FBI, and as everybody knows, that Jesus is always there, or the FBI only makes deals with those who come first.
Right.
But Jesus is always there for those who repent, regardless of when. So it was a shot across the bow and a warning. If you guys are the players, you better be first in, because if you don't, the only thing you have left is to confess to Jesus. and that will not make the rest of your life,
any better
here on Earth. And that's still out there. And what I said then is now even more to the point than it was when I made it, when I wrote it. It's more relevant.
Yeah.
Especially with Lisa Tanner gone now. Lisa Tanner was the manipulator. She was the one who was running everything. Now, I told you we wouldn't do these documents, but I will mention this.
Yes.
That for Vivian Harbottle, who has never said anything but the same thing, that she never said Rodney raped her because she couldn't identify her rapist. She said that the state, Lisa Tanner, told her the DNA implicated Rodney as her rapist, except I have seen that lab report, and that's not what it says.
Right.
And this will be an issue coming. But for Vivian Harbottle, Lisa Tanner lied to you. I've seen the lab report that was done in 97.
That same one that Lisa Tanner handed to Judge Langley.
She slipped to Judge Langley at that hearing when Vivian took the stand.
Right.
Because this was one of those records that Lisa Tanner moved to the AG's office in Austin, the one that I tagged her on last year in 2020 and 2021.
The one that you couldn't get because it would hamper.
I filed a request for all the evidence that Lisa Tanner and Mitzi Wolf transferred to their AG's office in Austin illegally, hiding it from the Defense and the Innocence Project. Lisa Tanner filed an exception. The Attorney General's office filed an exception with the Records Division of the AG's office. They argued that the release of these records to me would interfere with her ability, of the AG's ability to prosecute Rodney. Well, hell yeah. If you've been lying about all the results and the DNA tests and everything, which they have. And so what the AG ruled is, since she cited the law enforcement exception, that they could withhold these records from me. But the next paragraph says, however, if you have given these records to the opposing party, then you must release them.
Right.
Well, I sat back and waited for Lisa Tanner for a couple of months and the AG's office to release them to me if they had given them to the Innocence Project and Rodney's attorneys. Well, they didn't give them to me.
Which
means is a backdoor admission. They never gave them to the defense.
Right.
And so I provided this records request and explanation to Barry Scheck and Company, telling them that by virtue of the fact that Lisa Tanner and the AG's office did not release these records to me is an admission they haven't given them to the Innocence Project, to you.
Unless she did give it to them and they're not stating that she gave it to them, which means they're both lying to you, and then the Innocence Project didn't use it in defense of Rodney Reed.
Her history is never shared because, Barry Scheck could have a heart attack and somebody else come in and take over the Innocence Project and find him.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. Even if they did have it and lie that they didn't get it, then it says that they did not effectively defend Rodney Reed. But it comes back to the same thing.
But here's where I'm going with that. You see, this is foundational that Lisa Tanner and Mitzi Wolf have hidden exculpable evidence from the defense, which is part of the evidentiary hearing.
Yes.
What the court required them to do. So I proposed to Barry Scheck and gave them these records that they file a motion with Judge Langley to order the Attorney General to turn over those exculpable records that they admit that they have. Mm-hmm. Well, knowing Langley, he's going to deny the motion, right?
Right.
Opens a door for you to file an appeal with the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Right.
That Judge Langley's refusal is illegal and void because he has never executed the oath and not a judge. You see, that's another way to get Langley off the bench and get the records at the same time. Well, guess what? Baryshek didn't.
Right. You know, something else.
These are just some of the landmines I've laid in front of Baryshek to show and prove that he doesn't represent Rodney.
And without dragging it out too much further, a comment here from someone who was in the courtroom for this evidentiary hearing in July. Josie says, none of Rodney's lawyers cross-examined Rocky Wardlow and David Board like they should have.
Right. Just like Bryce didn't cross-examine. Yeah, just like Bryce didn't question Curtis Davis in that 2017 hearing.
Mm-hmm.
You see, Curtis is the one who caused that by telling CNN
yes,
that Jimmy wasn't home with Stacy the night before as he testified at trial. He was out drinking with his buddies. Now, the question is, where was he drinking and what buddies? And Bryce didn't ask him. Well, see, here's what the evidence shows. It shows that Jimmy killed Stacy between 8:30 and 9, put her in the floorboard of the passenger side of the pickup, rolled up in a ball, covered her body with trash bags full of all of her clothes that were in the apartment, and drove her dead body to Bastrop, where he met with Rocky Wardlow, David Board, Ed Salmela. These three were seen together with that red pickup around 9:30 that night in Bastrop, 2 blocks from the back of the high school parking lot where the truck was later found the next day.
Right.
Curtis Davis is working as a jailer, working that night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, that Monday night, Tuesday. 2 hours into the shift, about between 9 and 10, Curtis Davis claims that he broke a tooth, and he's got an emergency dental appointment and leaves the jail.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Davis lives in Giddings, as does Jimmy. Curtis drove over to where Jimmy was drinking with his buddies, which is why he knows that he wasn't home. He was drinking with his buddies, but the buddies he's drinking with are Ed Samela, David Board, and Rocky Wardlow. And it's Curtis Davis who then takes Jimmy back to Giddings with him, dropping him off on the highway at the street where he lives, up the hill, about 1/8 of a mile. Those apartments, he didn't dare drive up there and drop Jimmy off in front of the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
He dropped him off on the highway, and since I've driven that, from where that road is, you can see 5 miles in either direction. So at night, you can drop him off, no cars behind you, no coming, nobody would ever know. And then Curtis goes on into Giddings where he lives. That's how Jimmy got back. Now, how do we know that? Well, see, there's more to that CNN interview, and I have the transcripts.
Right.
Curtis goes on to tell CNN that the next morning when he showed up for work at the Bastrop jail around 8, he was shocked to find Jimmy there in the break room at the jail. And he goes, "Oh my God, what is he doing here? He doesn't work here anymore. Why is he in uniform? Why is he in civilian clothes? Oh, I was so confused." And I walked up to Jimmy and he says, "Stacy's missing." And he goes, "What do you mean?" Okay, stop. Curtis Davis was assigned to work the shift from 7 p.m. Monday to 7 a.m. Tuesday.
So why is he
so
at work at 8 o'clock? So you're telling me
that he's then going to work from 7 a.m. Tuesday to 7 p.m., Tuesday evening. So he's going to work a 24-hour shift. That's not what the records say.
And
the time sheets, and I have them.
Didn't he just leave because of a dental emergency?
Right.
So
and
what's he doing back
so
at
he
work?
wasn't. So you know what the time schedule says? Tuesday, he was to work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. again, from Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. So
Why is he there
why
at 8
was
a.m.?
Curtis there Tuesday morning? Because he just lied about what he was doing there. He was sent there as part of this cabal to stay with Jimmy to keep him from doing something stupid and getting all of them caught for covering up the murder of Stacy, because Jimmy was a loose cannon. Just in that little time that he was alone after the call came in to Carol Stites that Stacy didn't show up to work,
Right.
and Carol let him drive her car, look to see if Stacy was broke down on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy makes that 30-minute drive to Bastrop, hits Bastrop, goes to the HEB parking lot, makes that U-turn, and beats a path back to getting as fast as he can go, arriving a little after 8 a.m. Do you know why he needed to be back in Giddings by 8 a.m.? That's when the bank opened, so he could close the bank account before anybody finds her body, and the bank seals the account pending probate because they're using a joint account and they're not married. The bank's going to seal that account as soon as her body's found. And so just in that little bit of time, Jimmy closes a bank account and causes a problem, which causes them, the Rocky Wardlow and people, now to manufacture, check carbons and work them into evidence to try to give him reason for closing his bank account. You see how the dominoes go? All of this information is there, and Bryce didn't use any of it. And now Curtis Davis is dead.
Well defended, Innocence Project. Well defended. That's all I can say. There's nothing else that I can say with regards to this. When you present the information like this, Dave, there's nothing else to say. But good job, Innocence Project.
Oh yeah, for the state. The state is just extremely happy. Barry Scheck, they'll probably make a pigeon statue, of Barry Scheck and put it on the Capitol grounds, at the time of Barry Scheck's demise. For all the health he did, his name will probably be on the Texas Rangers, memorial.
Mm.
And Lisa Tanner and Mitzi Wolf, might make love on his tombstone.
Oh, wow. You know what?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's just getting a little, even for my humor.
You got too far.
That's how bad this guy is.
But
if you're a supporter of Rodney, this guy is the devil incarnate.
Yeah.
The person who smiles at you while they stab you in the back.
Yeah.
I defy anybody, any Reed supporter, to come out with anything Barry Scheck did to stop Rodney from being executed, that did anything at that evidentiary hearing to further Rodney's innocence. Nothing. Not anything. And to have Roderick keep going in front of the press and saying, all we want is a new trial for Rodney to prove his innocence. No, you can prove his innocence at these evidentiary hearings. That's what they're for, is to show actual innocence. Because if you don't, you'll never get a new trial. You'll get another execution date.
Yeah.
And I've given up trying to educate the Reed family on what's going on. Now, I was retained for $1 to be Rodney's consultant and spokesperson for him on evidence. And I honor that agreement. It's me to Rodney, not me to the family.
Right.
And the family in the 20 years that I've worked on the case, can't even walk 4 blocks to the courthouse and read the transcript and the evidence. The best help that Roderick could be to Rodney is for him to know Rodney's case, so he can talk intelligently to the press and can talk intelligently to Rodney's attorneys and hold their feet to the fire. If Roderick knew the case, he could have gotten in front of Barry Scheck and Kendall and Quincy and said, when are you going to raise this issue on Bayardo being here and typing autopsy reports in other people's names? Having claimed that he was a Harris County medical examiner while Harris County says he never was. When are you going to raise this? When are you going to raise the fact that Bayardo did the autopsy not as the Travis County medical examiner, but a private physician? So the testimony that Lisa Tanner elicited from him at the trial was aggravated perjury. But see, they don't know that. And so they can't hold Barry Scheck's feet to the fire, or Bryce Benjett, or Quincy McNeil, and that allows them to do what the hell they want, just like Calvin Garvey and Lydia Clay Jackson did, just like Bill Barbish did, just like Bryce did for what, 17 years?
Mm.
And now, Barry Scheck and Company for the last 2 years have been doing exactly the same thing. Not one thing have they...
At least they're consistent.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can always give them that.
Yeah.
But then Mitzi Wolf and Lisa Tanner were consistent too.
Well, right. That's a game plan, though.
Yeah. And the retired judges, man, they haven't deviated from the script one time. But you expect better for the people that are supposed to be representing Rodney.
Yes.
If they really did. But I'm telling you, you show me any evidence that they took any action to further Rodney's case on innocence. What in the Innocence Project, in that evidentiary hearing, what did they put before the court? Anything new? Or tied down anything?
Nothing. No.
They put the law enforcement officers on the stand who overheard Jimmy. Okay, that's a big deal. But that alone won't get you. That alone won't get you anywhere, as you saw with Shaver.
It would get at most, you know, it let your hair stand up, gave you some goose pimples, and a sliver of hope.
Well, it showed that.
But,
okay, yes,
so
there was evidence that Rodney knew Stacy, but that doesn't mean that Rodney didn't kill her.
Right.
Because see, the point is, the state said Rodney didn't know her, and Rodney's team didn't challenge the DNA evidence on Stacy. They claimed that he was having an affair. Well, crap. People having an affair, you know, they murder each other all the time. So how does that help him?
Yeah.
It doesn't, because it has to be proof of actual innocence. Now, proof of actual innocence is showing that, oh, by the way, the DNA that you've been using for Rodney isn't his.
There you go.
Now, I understand, but are you saying that the state will falsify? And I'm telling you, that's what the evidence shows. And let me tell you, I don't take that lightly, because once you acknowledge that, you go, son of a gun. How can anybody ever prove they're innocent on DNA evidence when the state has no qualms about changing the results? And there's no way to hold the state accountable because nobody will believe they will do it.
Right.
But look at what we have here. We have the date of death on all of the clothes that are on Stacy.
As
saying they're not hers, they belong to another woman who was murdered.
Else's date of death, yes.
Right.
And
how does
but
that
even
happen?
so, but even if you were to move away from this case, there was recently a prosecution of a district attorney that withheld evidence. That was what, 2 weeks ago? If that long?
I don't know which one you're talking about.
It was just in the news, and I forgot.
In what state?
Someone was there were charges brought up against someone in Texas, an attorney in Texas.
It seems like, yes, I do remember this, but you see, this is so, because Rodney Reed's case is moving so fast and there's so little time. I've had to, to dedicate as much time as I possibly can to Rodney's case while I'm still, dealing with that Tarrant County medical examiner and and a death penalty case there and several others. But I have to devote most of my time to Rodney's because he has so little time. Mm-hmm. Because I know the Court of Criminal Appeals is going to strike before Thanksgiving.
Where is it? Shoot. And I know the ladies. Geez, Josie, Colleen. You ladies, you can help me out with this one. I'm drawing.
Okay, wait. Let me add a little to this because there's something that is it Josie whose boyfriend died at the hands of the
Yes.
And okay, this new ruling.
Yes.
This new amendment allowing the Commission on Judicial Conduct authority over judicial candidates. Mm-hmm. That's the hammer to take out the Dallas County ME's office in that autopsy.
See that? Oh, boom. Here we go. Dallas prosecutor disbarred for withholding evidence that could have cleared men of murder charges. This was May 15. This was Richard E. Jackson.
Dallas County he's one of the assistant district attorneys in Dallas?
Yes.
Okay, that's under Crizalt. Crizalt is the new Dallas County district attorney. Crizalt was a judge who ran for that position 2 years ago. I spoke ad nauseum with Crizalt when he was a candidate, pointing out that the Dallas County Chief Medical Examiner's office are actually professors at the medical school, which is unconstitutional. Walked him through, and he goes, "Oh my God, Dave, I remember this stuff. I remember attorneys raising this issue in murder trials where I was the judge in the past. But they weren't as clear as you were explaining it to me, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I ruled against them. I now understand what you're saying." And I told him, well, if you're elected DA, you better take care of this, because if not, I'll be coming after you sometime. Well, he didn't. He's done nothing. And he's played that same game and prosecuted people the same way that his predecessors did. Well, this amendment, because medical examiners are judges, and I made the Dallas County medical examiner take the oath in 2011, and I have those oaths, they're ripe for the picking.
So a question here: can Fisher email about that so I can send it to his family? Oh, so Josie is asking if you can email. All right.
Right. Let me ask her this to hang back a little bit, because I'm going to have to focus hard on bringing the defense bar up to snuff fast in order to start going after all of these retired judges and continue to put pressure on the Innocence Project, and this all has to be done before Thanksgiving, because, as I said, I am positive the Court of Criminal Appeals plans on ruling against Rodney by Thanksgiving and ordering Shaver Langley to sign the next execution order. Mm-hmm. And so give me a little time, but the door has been opened now. Now let me pry it open in some of the more easier to go after medical examiners' offices and build back to Dallas, because Dallas is a bastion.
Mm-hmm.
It is the premier medical school in Texas, operating illegally as a judicial office. That's not the easiest thing to whack. When El Paso's medical examiner is a Mexican national in the country on a falsified visa, that was falsified by the county judge, who's now in Washington as a U.S. representative for El Paso, replacing Beto O'Rourke. Remember Beto O'Rourke's name?
Yeah.
You're going to see that back in the press because he's thinking about running against the governor again next year, which would be a laugh. But the woman who replaced Beto O'Rourke in Washington is the woman who falsified the immigration documents on their medical examiner. And the feds know this. We've had big discussions on this. And this medical examiner is the one that presided over those 22 autopsies on those Walmart, shoppers who were shot to death a couple of years ago. Remember that? That massacre at Walmart? Well, here's the problem. All the autopsies, all the death certificates are illegal. All the evidence collected is void, and you can't go to prosecution without this coming out. And the FBI questioned me for about an hour over that a couple of years ago, wanting to know all the particulars. And when I explained it to them, they go, "Oh my God, you're right. We didn't know that. We've always heard that this was in our jurisdiction, but nobody could explain it to us like you just did, and we now see what you're talking about." Same issue with, virtually same issue with the Santa Fe High School shootings in Galveston a couple of years ago. Same problem. Medical school pretending to be a medical examiner's office like Dallas. All the autopsies are illegal. All the death certificates are third-degree felonies. All the evidence collected was illegally collected, and none of it can be used against the defendant in a criminal case, which is why it languishes. So, like I said, I'm as busy as a beaver, but you don't see it because the state, doesn't want any of this out. But it gets harder and harder by the day because I'm busy, building foundations, dealing with elected officials, moving legislation to push the state into a corner that they can't get out of. And I'll tell you, this election pretty well did that.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest, the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct is the most secretive of Texas institutions and also one of the most corrupt. But the commission is having a hard time figuring out how they can walk away from a judge with no oath executing an inmate, because if it ever gets out into the national press, the whole Texas criminal justice system is under indictment, including the Commission on Judicial Conduct. This is the corner they're in, that Bryce put them in with Barry Scheck by letting one of their clients get executed by a judge with no oath. So the pieces are coming together, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
And we will see Barry Scheck, if he was on his game and was paying attention to what I was telling him and showing him and showing the case law that proves it, then he would have, while they're waiting for Langley in that week to file his finding of facts and conclusions of law, they should have been drafting their appeal.
Right.
So as soon as Langley filed his findings Monday of last week, on Tuesday, the Innocence Project should have filed their motion to vacate Langley's findings and the evidentiary hearing on the grounds that he never took the oath and is not a judge. And see, as they filed it, by the time the court had any opportunity to act on it, the constitutional amendment would have been, voted on and solidified their position.
But it's still not too late.
Oh, no. And Barry Scheck has for the rest of this week. That's why I filed it on Monday, because if by Monday of next week he hasn't acted, he'll be facing a state bar grievance against all of them.
Well, I can tell you this, Dave. I will not be walking anywhere on any street, anywhere near you for the next few months at minimum.
I thought you wanted to get together over Thanksgiving here in Texas. Change your mind, did you?
Yeah. Yeah. let's see how that works out next year. Because you are fair weather friends. Listen, I'm making it public. I'm not hiding and saying anything. I'm letting you know outright. You're a target, and I'm facilitating you from a distance.
We're following the COVID rules.
Right.
Distance.
We're maintaining social
no
distance.
mass distance.
So, but
I feel like a leper.
I want to thank you though, Fish.
Hey,
for
you're a good friend,
the work.
and you're a good friend of Rodney's and your listeners. And now, it's time to accept the facts that Rodney has never had counsel that represented him, and he still doesn't. But there's still time for Barry Scheck to save his Innocence Project, because he's got very little time.
Yeah.
Because if one thing I am very sure of, this will destroy the Innocence Project. Anybody that's a listener who has a family member that's represented by the Innocence Project, or knows anybody who's represented by the Innocence Project, they need to put them on notice really fast that this is not the Innocence Project of 20 years ago. This is a Innocence Project who has apparently moved to the money side of criminal defense, meaning work with the state and get paid well and have a lot of money and a lot of prestige at the expense of your clients. I can't say it any more, simply and succinctly than that, because I have not one time in the 12 years that I've been dealing with Bryce Benjett and the Innocence Project, not one time have I seen them act in any way that is in the best interest of their client. They go through a few of the motions, but always falling short to ever winning in any case or issue or point. They dance around the issue, but never drive home the point. And you see, so people know, that October 2017 evidentiary hearing with Doug Shaver in Bastrop, where Michael Bodden took the stand.
Yes.
Do you know they have deleted any evidence that ever took place?
No.
Because Doug Shaver was illegally on the bench. And when I raised that issue, the sheet showing that the hearing took place,
yes,
it disappeared.
How can it disappear?
They just changed the records, showing that Shaver was not in Bastrop during those 3 days in October 2017.
But there has to be some record that puts him there. Outside of that, there has to be something.
Well, yeah. I mean, the TV stations reporting it all, but
So what happened to that?
if anybody was, any attorneys were doing any research and pulled the records, they would not know that it even happened. And more of those stories that are in the media, they're gone from the internet. They're no longer there. Most of the stories about, my actions in El Paso, in Lubbock, in Ector County, in Nueces County, they're all gone.
They're trying to erase you, Fish.
They're not just erasing me, they're erasing everything.
Another reason why I'm going to stay away from you.
Kevin, everybody knows that a white mark's easier to erase from a record than a black mark. Yeah.
I give you that.
Another little witticism from the Badinsky.
It's kind of like how you needed to use a black light to find Rodney's fingerprints in the truck.
Yeah. They used a black light in Stacy's truck and found no fingerprints from any black people in there. Yeah, that's the kind of logic that. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, this is it's just another sad tale, in the Texas criminal justice system of somebody else that has fallen, into the mall and is being ground up by the system, and they have the legendary Innocence Project representing them. Oh, really?
Yes.
So, like I said, we will see what Barry Scheck does. In the interim, as a warning to Mr. Scheck and company, this stuff is being what you just posted is being put all over the internet to all types, to all agencies that work for Innocent Project style defenses.
Mm-hmm.
So, trust me, it's only going to get worse and fast.
Right.
And it's out there now, and it's with the bar journals, and is all they have to do based on what I've given them. It doesn't take any research at all to go, son of a gun, he's right. So why the hell isn't Barry Scheck appealing the trial judge's rulings when the judge doesn't have an oath? He's not a judge. The two cases that I cited them, are just two of a dozen similar ones over the last 100 years by the Texas Supreme Courts.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see if Barry can be more obstinate and hard-headed and is just as much a killer as J.D. Langley.
Mm.
Or is this like that Christmas story of the guy, oh, God, I hate that show, that actor who is going to jump off the bridge where the angel comes that has to ring a bell to get his wings? What is that show?
Is that Miracle on 64th Street? Or 32nd, 34th Street? Something that
or something like that. Anyway, so is Barry Scheck, is he going to get saved before Christmas? And wake up, and count his blessings and work for the people that he's supposed to? Or is he going to become Mr. Potter?
Well, that one is left to be determined, and we have to keep our eyes open to see.
Right, really. That's what this is all about now. Is time will tell. But trust me, I'll continue to turn the screws. And if I'm going to be filing state bar grievances, they're going to be in New York too.
Right.
And Barry, he can, even somebody with Barry Shuck's reputation, when state bars are confronted with the facts, and the media starts looking,
Mm-hmm.
even the best reputations of people like Trump can take a hit.
On that note.
On that note, I'll say good night.
On that note, yeah, Josie, I won't get Fisher started on the 11-year-old girl Bayardo helped get a murder conviction on, for the sibling.
We
won't get started
about,
on it. She said Lucretia something, but
Lucretia Murray.
I remember you and I talking about that a little bit.
Well, let me tell her real quick if she's not aware. Lucretia Murray was in a shooting here less than a year ago.
What?
Yeah, she was shot, in her pickup by a guy. He unloaded on her pickup, hitting her in the arm and the side of her pickup in Belton, Texas. I have those records. I'll pull that article and send it to you so you can forward it.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, no. This and Lucretia Murray's case will be affected by this. Do you know why they went after her so hard?
Why is that?
The little girl who died was the daughter of a DPS employee. That's why.
Okay.
And see, that's what got Kathy Lynn Henderson dying in prison. That child was also the child of a DPS employee. And that's why they threw the book at her. And then Bayardo at the end finally admitted, well, it could have been accident like the lady was saying. And so with that, they were getting ready to, they dropped the death penalty and were getting ready to let her out of prison, and she died before she got out of prison.
Yeah.
So that was Kathy Lynn Henderson. But again, if the victims are related to law enforcement, oh my God, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what the Lucretia Murray deal was all about. Anyway, so we'll talk to you later, and I'll get this to you on Lucretia Murray. That way you can pass it along.
Okay, will do.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Fish.
Signing off.
Appreciate
Thank you.
you. Take care.
Sure. Bye-bye.
All right.
I wanna touch you now.
I see them lost in illusion. But, when you have people like David Fisher in your corner, you don't stay lost for too long. And so I want to thank David once again for his relentless work in this case and other cases like it. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for your time. We went over. I didn't think we would go over this much, but we went over a whole hour. But, the information is there needing to get out. And so there you have it. What you do with it? Well, that's up to you. Ask questions. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Fisher's word for it. By the end of this day, you should be asking more questions than anything else. Go ahead and ask the questions. If you want to ask Fisher some questions, go ahead and ask him. Well, you might want to route them through me, but yeah, Josie, I know, I understand where you stand. Disappointed in the Reed family for ignoring Fisher. He signed up. He signed on to this for $1 and has been true to the job for 20 years. You know, but what else? What else can you say? You know, where else has anyone done this type of investigation for Rodney? Where has this information been presented anywhere on Rodney's behalf? You know, you have to take these things into consideration. And David Fisher has put in the work, and he has the files to prove it. Hence, I could have shown some documents. And I have been showing documents, courtesy of David Fisher. And he didn't fabricate any of them. His information that he requested, we have shown on this broadcast where he has submitted records requests and gotten denials, and what records that he has gotten years later, which shows in contrast what has been presented. It's not something that he has made up. It's not something that I have made up. I just have the platform to facilitate the passing on of the information. So, you know, let's go on and ask the questions. Ask the hard questions. Question those that are put in the positions that you would expect would be above reproach. Those that you would expect to be looking out for equality in the laying out or the meting out of justice. Ask the questions. Those of you living in the United States, it's your right. It's a part, you know, it's what has been afforded to you. Take advantage of it. In the background, the sound of Nikki Blaze. The track is called Lost in Illusion. And this is how we're going to be bouncing on out of here tonight. I want to thank you once again, or this morning, no. Thank you once again to my affiliates earlier out. One Harmony Radio, NIE Radio, Island Worldwide, WGLRO, Oliwap Radio, Dosic Media Group, the Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com, PEMGTV.com. Thank you. Truly appreciate love each and every one of you. The sponsors, much love to you. PEMG TV, Pulse Media Group, Althea and her Healing Heavenly Hands, Reggae Global Entertainment, McNeil Trucking. Thank you. Couldn't do it without you. Those of you who have been listening in and supporting all along, thank you. Couldn't do it without you. I wouldn't try, and you have my word on that. Catch you tomorrow, Healthy Love, or later on for Healthy Love. Y'all take care until we meet up again. Blessings to you.
Oh, I see them lost. I see them lost. I see them running. Oh, I see them running. Oh, my people lost.
Hey, yo, this is Paramount.
Oh, my people lost. Yeah. I wanna touch you now.
Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew is on kevinstew.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment.